So my name is Melissa Yukon and I'm the goat herder with the Old Irish Goat Society. I'm a goat herder by title, so I manage the herd of goats here in Howth for conservation grazing. I grew up on the farm and I started with a pet goat and I built up a herd over time during my teenage years. And so that's where I learned my trade, learned my skill, walked the hills of the Burren really. The thing I love the most with dedicating yourself to any cause is to establish that connection. Starting this project, I was introduced to a whole new group of goats. So to actually build up that connection, that trust and that working relationship, you can't make it happen or you can't force it, but you have to, I suppose, make the adjustments and make sure that they get to trust you and know you and understand you and vice versa. The animal has a mind of its own, so it's us connecting with them too. It's a very rewarding challenge, this teamwork, human and animal together.
My name is Hans Visser. I'm the Biodiversity Officer with Fingal County Council and I'm responsible for all the nature conservation projects in the county. The goat grazing project came about as a result of the last big wildfire that we had here in 2021 on Shilmartin Hill. The fire here burned for 6 weeks and it really brought home, I suppose, the problems that wildfires cause for people that live in the area, as well as public safety, and then also for nature and the landscape like that takes a long time to recover from these wildfires. So the County Council wanted to have a bit more of a proactive approach to wildfire management.
Fingal County Council did a wildfire management plan with wildfire experts to map the wildfire risk in Howth. With that, they created strategic fire breaks on strategic sites. The next step, I suppose, was to manage these fire breaks. A fire break is a strip in the habitat or the landscape that's kept short of vegetation, short of biomass or flammable material. It's easy to access for man or machine, and if a fire were to break out, because the gorse burns so hot, the recommendation is to let the gorse burn into itself and to man that fire break to prevent it jumping across.
But the big question then is, well, how do we actually maintain them? There's different ways of doing that. I suppose you can do it mechanically, because you use heavy machinery. You can do it chemically, by actually spraying herbicides, which we didn't think was appropriate at all. But we can also look at actually using livestock grazing. And because the vegetation here is mainly comprised of bracken and gorse and bramble, goats are actually considered the most appropriate for this purpose. And then we kind of have to look even what type of goats will we actually use for this. So because we look at male goats, we look at meat goats, we look at the old native breed. And in the end, when we kind of looked at it all, we thought that Old Irish Goat was basically the best option. And then we teamed up with the Old Irish Goat Society to actually run a grazing trial of these wildfire breaks.
So what makes the Old Irish Goat special is the fact that they carry this old age genetics, their heritage, they're part of our heritage, but we still need to rely on our genetic diversity to withstand any threats, I suppose, to our DNA or our animal kingdom and our species. So it's about maintaining as much diversity to build that resilience, and that's where the Old Irish Goat comes in. So the goats that arrived in Howth came from the national herd in Mulranny. I started with them in August, and we started our preparation works for moving goats to Howth. With that, there was two parts to it, I suppose, biosecurity and training. So the biosecurity part was to make sure we had a safe, clean stock arriving in Howth. Howth was pretty much a virgin site. There hadn't been any goats here for a long time, so we treated the animals accordingly with the veterinary advice to make sure there was no parasites moving across with them to this new site. Second part was training. So these guys were trained onto the virtual fencing system, no fence, and that training started in Mayo. With that, the most docile stock were selected initially, and a crew of 25 goats came across with me.
The objective of this trial, one was to find out do goats keep the vegetation short in wildfire breaks? But we also wanted to find out do goats eat the seedlings after a fire? Can goats control the regrowth after a fire? Of course, that has survived right when it comes back up. Do they do that? Can goats be used to create wildfire breaks? So, like if you put them in a really mature stance, can they help to clear those? Because we have very little experience with goats and wildfire management in Ireland. We kind of had to start from scratch to find out, well, how useful are they? But I suppose when it comes to using goats on Howth, it's quite site specific. How do you apply a project like that here in this particular setting? One of the things, for example, we wanted to do was the initial principle that we had, okay, we get a herder, and that herder will walk through the landscape, taking the goats with her from place to place. She just walks around all the time. And we learned within a week that was actually not going to happen. Use of the collars, that was actually tied in to a request by the local community. We kind of looked at the possibility of having grazing on site to achieve some of the conservation goals on these lands. But they were very clear that they did not want to see any fencing on the land. So I went to have a look, and I found a no-fence technology then in Norway, where they're using it for goat grazing schemes as well, where the goats basically get like a collar on, and it allows you then to kind of pinpoint where you want them to graze.
Howth being such a public domain and a close community area as well, the one request that was made was that areas wouldn't be cordoned off or fenced off. This new technology called No Fence, it's a virtual fencing collar that every animal wears. It emits an audio tune when they get close to a boundary, which is mapped on the phone. And if they don't heed that audio warning, they would get an electric pulse. We also have GPS tracking on them with those collars, and we can monitor their grazing behaviour. For the grazing of the fire breaks, we've mapped that fire break on the virtual fencing app. We move the collars and the stock into that fire break, pasture becomes active, and the goats are left on site to graze at that fire break.
In terms of the results of the project, we know that indeed the goats are capable of keeping the wildfire breaks open, so the primary purpose of the goats has certainly been proved. What we've also seen is that the mature stands, the goats are actually really good at clearing those. So in terms of what we also found in terms of the coarse regrowth, we did learn that the goats can't control that. I think all in all, the project has certainly shown that goats can actually keep wildfire breaks open on sort of a rotational grazing basis. They don't need to be there all the time. So again, it just shows, I suppose, the multiple benefits of using goats for these type of purposes.
So as part of the Howth grazing project, we also executed the breeding program here of the Old Irish goat. We had 3 successful kidding seasons here, and with that we welcomed 78 new additions. The original 25 goats grew to a herd of 137 goats on Howth Head over the 3 years. All the kids that have been born here in Howth are still in Howth. If we think about the kids born in the first breeding season of spring 2022, they call Howth their home. With that, they're very settled, well-trained stock. So any animals born into the project here in Howth have been trained from day one. The education side was very important to share what we were doing, why we were doing it. The most important message was that these goats were here to do a job. So it was very much the education side. With that, we accommodated a lot of scout groups and school groups to share that message. By connecting with school groups and the scouts, with the younger generation, I suppose we shared what we do and why, and then to visualize and actually physically see the animals grazing that connects all the dots. So the children get to see firsthand what these guys can eat and what they like to eat, free choice. And I suppose that sends home the message of what my goats are capable of and what they're doing here. And that's a full description in a visual. I arrived in Howth with my goats, and I was content enough with that. Then through local connections, farm here is an active working farm. There's a community there straight away. People reached out and were keen to volunteer. I suppose the job description was 5 days a week, but understanding livestock, I was also very keen to make sure these animals were well looked after and checked on even at the weekends. I think it's essential to have a physical check on animals once a day. So through word of mouth, I started training up my goat squad volunteers, which would have covered the weekend tasks of checking the animals. With that, we built quite a crew, very committed crew, and they look out for these animals and deeply care for them. So the volunteers have formed real friendships with each other, and they've formed a real community network. So they're a real support network to myself. We've also accommodated a lot of TY students and work experience students. Been a lot of public engagement with the project. The goats have really brought that message of positivity and just something different. The community are very much invested in these goats, and they're very much at home here. Yeah, cherished.
The response of the community actually has been very interesting for us as well. They've been very supportive of this project, but also, I suppose, by putting a bit of life back in the landscape. Like, I suppose people got used to the whole idea that there was, this is a natural landscape and, there's no animals and everything, but this is actually like an agricultural landscape. And I think it has kind of helped to create a connection for people again, to kind of reinstate the agricultural use of the land. Not the culture, the first ones to come, but we've also then since introduced pigs, we've also introduced Highland cows, surely a lot more interesting. Instead of just the scenery, I mean, that's spectacular, but having some livestock around the place as well, I think just helps to bring that landscape to life.
I suppose when I came to see Howth, and I just thought I'd better go up and just see what my gut tells me here. And it was that feeling of you're away from things. It is in Dublin, it's close to the city, but it's very unique in the fact that you feel you're up on the hill away from day-to-day life. And then secondly, the community here is very impressive, very welcoming. It's been a joy to be part of this community. I feel the goats are settled here now, but it has been a very special experience. It has been a big chapter of my life. It's been amazing, the concept of it, the execution of it, and just the whole dynamic of it has been very special.
The County Council is very keen to continue with this project. It has really proved that it actually works in terms of actually maintaining wildfire breaks. The local community has been very supportive of the project. The project has certainly been a success, and will be certain that we continue with the goat grazing. We'll also be adding more livestock. We'll be adding more pigs and more cattle to the project as well. And I think this project that we have done so far really can be replicated anywhere in Ireland.
That's hopefully the next chapter, but it's to actually be able to share this skill from the past to utilise a sustainable manner of managing these animals, managing landscapes and habitats, and giving everybody a chance to be part of the change, looking after our environment. So it's exciting to see that, and it's very unique and very special, and I think it's resonated with a lot of people. And like I came here alone with goats, and I was like, I'll be fine. Goats, not thinking about the collection to create, and that now means the goats are home here, like they're here. They don't move with me.